Interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. A lot of the early parts of this presentation are going to be mostly a recap of the RFA. So if someone comes late, they shouldn't miss much. Good afternoon. My name is Jevin Gibb. I'm the Economic Development Director for Salt Lake County. I am joined by Jayla Lundstrom, Brooke Shanklin, and Teresa Young. Jayla is your point of contact for all of your questions related to WISE. She's a coordinator on my staff. Brooke Shanklin is a manager on my staff who's helping with the WISE program. And Teresa Young is our contracts and procurement officer. So she's here to keep us from making any mistakes and is just the amazing person who helps us with all of these programs. So today I'm going to go through my presentation relatively quickly because what I want to do is just to give a little more context above and beyond what was provided in the RFA, and then give you some time to ask questions. I think the real value of these webinars is in the Q&A, so I'll try to leave substantial time for that. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function that should be at the bottom of your screen. You can also raise your hand and I'll just take turns calling on people and allowing them to turn on their audio to ask questions. Jayla will be answering basic questions in the chat, but if she doesn't answer your question, I will get to it. We will also take all of the questions that are asked today and post them online in the FAQ that's associated with WISE. So with that, I will move into the slides. Today, we're going to go through a program overview, giving a little bit of additional information for the RFA. We'll talk about the application, how it happens, the process, the timeline for applying, and then again, get to any questions that you have. So for WISE, the mayor's economic development strategy is really about finding a balance between three major issues. I am reading that you lost my audio. Can I get one of my team to turn your video on to let me know whether you're hearing me? Okay. Great. So for the mayor's economic development strategy, there are three big issues that we try to balance. It's about economic opportunity, economic competitiveness, and quality of life. For economic opportunity, this map here shows one of the big things that we look at, which is just the difference in economic opportunity for people born in different parts of Salt Lake County. It's wildly unfair, shouldn't happen, but it is the reality that we're faced with. Workforce development and the goals of the WISE program is to address those economic opportunity issues, but acknowledging that by connecting people with higher income, in-demand jobs, that affects our economic competitiveness, and all of these issues relate to our quality of life. And I'm probably speaking to people who know about these issues much better than me, but when we look at educational attainment in Utah, we see much different results based on factors like gender, race, and geography. On the left side of your screen there are findings from the Gardner Institute's Diversity Fact Book. We also see that, for lower income communities, only 16% graduate college, which results in wages that are 50% lower than the county average. So how did the county get here? As in, how did we get to the WISE program? What are we trying to achieve? So a little over a year ago, ARPA was passed. We started trying to figure out how to make WISE, forgive the pun, I didn't mean to do that, how to make prudent investments. We launched a three-month engagement with a consulting firm called People Rocket that was really focused on understanding the unique context of Utah so that we didn't just take a best practice from someplace else and try to drop it in here in some sort of cookie cutter fashion. We wanted to figure out how to learn from the best, but apply it to the specific Utah context. As part of that process, we had a bunch of stakeholder interviews. We had 3 workshops. We did a survey that had over, almost 300 responses. So it was a lot of trying to figure out how to learn and apply. Generally, for those survey results, we saw a lot of interest in income or stipends, then for mental health services, career coaching, housing support, childcare support. Not anything particularly surprising. The question for us, though, was how do we create an intervention that we can measure? Because for the county, ARPA funding is one-time funding. So we have to scale up and then scale down by 2026. So this program needs to be in and out by 2026. So it was, how do we create change within that limited time frame? Our idea is to work with community-based orgs, trainers, and the eventual participants, so that Salt Lake County can convene all of these groups. For community orgs, it's that these groups provide support to low-income and diverse communities across Salt Lake County. They're the connectors. They understand the community, whereas trainers really excel in understanding the skills that are necessary to connect someone to a better job, and potentially the trainers and the community-based orgs can work together to understand the disconnects. For WISE participants, we are targeting Salt Lake County residents at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. That information is provided in much more detail within the RFA. For a single person, that's about $27,000. For a household of 4, it's in the mid 50s. A proposal can say, hey, we'd like to target below that, or we'd like to target a subgroup of that. But at the very least, all participants will have to meet that 200% of federal poverty guidelines requirement. We want to really make a big point about this issue. We want to avoid any duplication of available services. This program is about solving gaps, adding services to existing programs, and connecting people with existing services. One of the things that we really learned in our exploration period with our consultants was that there are a lot of wraparound services available in Utah. A lot of it is through the Utah Department of Workforce Services, but there are some awesome community orgs that are also in this space. We would not want to fund an organization to create their own version of something that's available, even if maybe it's their own version with tweaks. That's something that we're going to be really hesitant to support, because the goal here is to figure out how to work within the existing space. Approved partners will work extensively with the Utah Department of Workforce Services and other agencies, because what we would like to do is bring together this ecosystem to serve as a convener in that group and to figure out how to make things work better. Because in the end, our program is about using models from programs like the City University of New York's ASAP program, from 1 Million Degrees out of Illinois, or Project Quest out of Texas, to say, hey, we think that there's this need for an additional team to help people achieve success. And I'll get into that a little more later. The last piece is our goal here, while we want to do good, and we believe that with partners like the folks on this call, we could do good. This is a little more about proving impact and demonstrating return on investment. Because within the 4.5-year time window of ARPA, our opportunity is to show how things could be different and how a better investment could potentially be made. So we're going to really emphasize metrics, data, and kind of measuring success along the way. I think you'll notice in the RFA, there's a really heavy emphasis on data in a way that might be cumbersome for some folks, but we're emphasizing that because we have to measure return on investment. So I'll jump more into the application. An organization can apply either as a community-based org or CBO, or as a trainer. For CBOs, these groups will connect eligible WISE participants to better jobs. The goal for those CBOs is to bring in WISE participants, but they need to be more than a headhunter. And I think we put that specific language into the RFA. This needs to be a holistic approach to understanding the barriers that a lower income person might face to getting connected to that better job. What we will fund for that CBO is providing one or more of the WISE services, which you see on the right-hand side of the screen under trainers. So it's not that we'll provide some, general revenue for a community-based organization. We will provide specific restricted revenue for those services. And a CBO needs to propose which services they want to provide that bolt on to their existing activities. For trainers, this is kind of providing that team approach using the best, lessons learned from best practice, programs across the country. Outreach to communities. This is folks who can get out there that understand lower income communities in Salt Lake County and can communicate the pathway to a better job and how it would be supported as they come into and through a program. Academic advising, and here you'll note in the RFA that we have a specific student to advisor ratio that we want to achieve. This is again bringing in best practices and trying to understand, does it sufficiently affect student success to have those additional advisors available? Resource navigation, which I'm going to come back to, career coaching, which is again helping folks understand the pathway, and mental health counseling is something that came out of the surveys that we put out and the conversations that we had with the community. Because one of the big things that we saw was that mental health issues really negatively affected a lot of folks' success in these programs. The one piece that I'm going to go back to, though, is resource navigation. And I think that's something that we would like to see with both trainers and community-based organizations. At the beginning of this idea, we thought that we would actually fund wraparound services. We thought, let's fund childcare, transportation, housing, let's go there. And one of the things that we learned was there are other actors there. We don't want to duplicate those services. We don't want to compete with those services. So our emphasis is to say, hey, those programs exist. Why aren't people using them? What else needs to be done to help people use them and to increase access? And so that's what we think resource navigation could do, which is to really become that person or people who help participants connect with DWS, who don't just give an email address, but create a warm connection, and they create that phone call and stay on the phone call for the first conversation, or they make a personal introduction. Resource navigation is a huge piece here. Getting kind of into the nuts and bolts of the application, you've got three things that you should be tracking. One is a letter of intent, very basic form, not required but encouraged. That needs to be submitted by this Friday at 5 p.m. If you submit it late, we may have time to respond to it, but we don't guarantee that we will. Our response is to make sure that your proposal is aligned with the RFA so that nobody goes through the hard work of completing a full application only to be told that they're not eligible or that their proposal isn't aligned with the vision that we're going after. We want to save you time. This should make your life easier and provide an opportunity for us to give you some initial feedback, or for you to highlight, I really like this application, but you've got some problems, or there are some issues that might make it less likely that I would apply or participate even if I was approved. The LOI is there to solve problems ahead of time. The second and third piece, that is the application form, which is available on the website, and the staffing and budget template. Those are both due July 1st by 5 p.m. That's basically saying before you disappear for the July 4th weekend, get those materials into us. These can all be found on the website, which is available below. For all participants of this meeting, we'll email you this slide deck so that you have it. One of the things that I want to hit on there, actually, I'm going to save it because I have another slide coming. Your letter of intent, this is kind of a snapshot of it. Super brief, go in there, make sure to just give us enough information for us to understand what you're doing. Don't kill yourself going really deep in the information here. Save that for the application. The staffing and budget template. For some of the organizations that maybe looked at the Good Jobs Challenge, who are looking at federal grants, you'll notice I just stole that form from them. So a lot of the fields that you see here, you may have filled out previously if you were looking at that grant program. Look at this form and make sure you take the time to understand how the linked cells are flowing from one financial document to the other, or from one worksheet within the larger workbook, because there are many things that you aren't, you're supposed to enter data in one sheet and it populates the fields in the others. So take some time to familiarize yourself with that before you start filling things in. If at some point you accidentally break a reference or things stop working, you can go back and re-download the original document from the website and figure out what went wrong. If something goes terribly wrong, contact us, and maybe we can help you undo that without, we're not going to help you provide a persuasive application, but if it's something in the mechanics of it breaks, reach out, please. For this one, you will provide a budget narrative, a staffing plan, All of that will then funnel into the budget overview. And then for 4, the performance criteria, including proposed KPIs. Don't kill yourself over that. That is very important for us to understand whether an organization is capable to do performance-based budgeting, whether you are ready and willing to work with us to make sure that funding is right-sized to the program performance, because we're investing in something where there's a lot of unknowns. What we want to know is that there's flexibility in your program, that you understand your cost drivers, and that you're able to communicate those to us. So put those in there as best you can, and then realize that there's also a place in the application for you to provide a narrative in support of that kind of more quantitative analysis. You can do the qualitative in the application and the quantitative here. And also, you will not be bound by the numbers put in here. This would just be the basis for negotiation as we moved into the contract negotiation period if a proposal is approved. This is a timeline. I think it'll be helpful to provide you the slides. I'm not going to walk through this, but remember, Friday, the letters of intent are due. They can be provided after that point, but we'd like them before Friday so that we can provide feedback by the 20th. And then we'll have another webinar on the 16th. This would be, hey, we're getting really deep in the application and have some more questions. So our goal is to have applications submitted July 1st. We'll hold a selection committee on the 11th so that we can announce awards on the 15th. One of the things that we've thought is that we kind of slowed ourselves down on our timeline. Initially, we thought, hey, let's launch everything in the fall. We'll probably spend the fall making sure that we have baseline data for all of our participants, because again, we have to measure return on investment. If we can't show what the baseline was and how WISE improved outcomes, we don't achieve success for this program. So we're going to take our time to work with partners to make sure that all of the necessary data is in place for this program to be a success for us and for our partners, because our partners will be able to demonstrate the value of the investment to other funding sources as we get to the end of the county's funding timeline in 2026. So as I said, we'll have another webinar June 16th. Those invites will be sent out. Jayla's going to manage that process. So now I managed to make it through in 20 minutes. I hope I didn't stumble too much through my explanation, but I wanted to make as much time available for y'all to ask questions. And so I will go into the Q&A.
Yeah, real quick, everyone, just to go over this again, Q&A can be found with the three dots on the far right corner. So if you click that, it will open up the Q&A option.
Okay, Jimmy, we'll send a link to the recording to all participants here. It will be on the website. We'll also send out a follow-up email with that link and with a copy of the slides. The slides will also go to the website. All right, so Jenny Abbott, some of the baseline data in the RFA are difficult to document. Yes, we are building that capacity, but may not have significant baseline data. How will that issue be addressed? So Jenny, that goes to taking the fall, and I realize one semester is not great baseline data, but it is a way to start. The other piece that we might, I think what, and I'm trying to remember specifically, I've got way too many windows open on a tiny laptop screen, but there are some baseline data that are absolutely required, others that are good to have. Things like job placement and job retention, you might not have been tracking. We'll track it for a little bit, and then we'll make sure that we've got it robustly on the back end. And I'm going to make sure to follow up with you on that. I don't want to take the time to reread through specific parts of the RFA to give you a better answer, but I'll make sure to follow up, and I'll make sure that that answer is posted in the frequently asked questions. All right. That was the only question that I see in the Q&A. Oh, I think I got another one. Oh, come on. Does the program need to include all 5 areas mentioned, or is it okay to have a smaller number of focuses? Okay. So it depends on whether you're applying as a community-based organization or as a trainer. For community-based organizations, we're not requiring that all 5 services be provided. So a community-based organization may say, hey, you know, how we see ourselves working in parallel or complementary to the trainers is we just want to focus on outreach. We'll do outreach and maybe a little coaching, but
Everyone, I think we lost Jevin momentarily. He'll be back in just 1 minute. So I can go ahead and answer a couple of these questions as well. And Brooke, if you want to jump in too until we wait. Jevin, are you back?
Kayla, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Technology. Okay. So I think I stopped when I was talking about for trainers, all 5 services must be provided. That being said, if you already provide those services, don't necessarily have to do additional. So if you say, I think I can serve these students sufficiently in career coaching, like I've got that, that's fine. Explain that. But if you say, yeah, I do career coaching and advising, but I don't do outreach and I don't do resource navigation where I'm actively helping folks connect with housing and childcare, well, then you would use WISE funding to do missing pieces. So this helps you get to all 5 if maybe you do 1 or 2. Um, okay, a little more.
Jevin, we have a
Sharon,
couple more
put something
questions
in the chat and Sharon, if my terrible internet connection messed up and didn't get a sufficient answer, toss something in the chat and I'll try to circle back to where my internet made me miss. So how much funding does the county have to award in this first application round? We're going to do 6 years of this program. Our goal, in order to be flexible throughout the duration of the project and keep funds available as we continue to learn, is to essentially do $6 million in 2022, about $2 million in 2023, and then a million-ish in 2024. We will commit any and all remaining funds in 2024. So it may be a little over $1 million, could be a little less, but that's what we'll do there. The goal there is let's be flexible, but also there are certain programs that are really doing well. We would continue to increase the funding levels for those so that those programs can continue to expand. Another question from Kathy. When looking at the advisor to individual ratio, can an advisor serve multiple functions? That's a really good question. So I would say, and let's make sure we will follow up on this one because I want Teresa or maybe our legal team to come in and weigh in. But looking within kind of the four corners of the RFA, if someone is an advisor, they would count toward the advisor to individual ratio, even if they served in multiple functions. You will be asked in the application to identify if people are serving in multiple functions. So I would say they will count, but please take into consideration, the goal, which is to have as much advising capacity available as possible to students. We wouldn't want to be prohibitive and say, no, because your advisors are really holistic and they serve in multiple functions, they no longer count and you have to get really expensive on your advising capacity. I think that's unfair. I think we're open to that bigger idea, but I would say backing up a little bit, think about our goals and what we're trying to achieve so that if you are having an advisor serve across multiple functions, it's not just checking the box to hit our compliance requirements, that there is a functional reason for that. Okay. Jayla, do you see any other questions?
Yeah, Jevin, we had one more question from Jimmy. Will you require a consistent method for reporting baseline data or a required system or format?
Yeah, and what we will do is we will probably use Smartsheet as our back-end kind of reporting tool, and we will provide a template that says your data must be exported to fit this format. And so it'd simply be you exporting to a CSV file, which is comma separated values file. I'm going to assume people know what it is. If you don't, it looks like an Excel spreadsheet. But our partners, we would work with our partners to help them figure out however they're tracking their data, because I know some folks have really complex CRMs. However they're tracking it, here's how they would export it. Here's how we get it into the CSV format that we would need in order to align everybody's data. And then we would have it kind of with a consistent method for reporting on our end. That being said, we will not force anybody to use a single CRM or to change how they track things. Our goal is to say, however you work with students, we just need you, or participants, we just need you to track this information, and we'll figure out how to manipulate the data so that it works consistently across all partners. And I will hang out in case we have any additional questions. While I'm waiting on any remaining questions, one thing that I do want to point out is the balance that we're trying to strike between not dictating to partners how they do things. We realize that a lot of the best practices that we see across the country are by institutions that are creating programs for themselves. Very rarely is it a county creating programs for other people. So we want to have the flexibility to say, do things the way that you think they will work. What we balance that against is that we need sufficient uniformity in order to measure whether it worked and whether there's impact achieved. Because again, on the back end, we need to be able to measure return on investment.
We had another chat in the Q&A, Jevin.
Yeah, Okay, from Sharon again. Who is the team who developed the grant? Regional development? Yeah, Sharon, it's my team. In cooperation with our consultant, People Rocket, and extensive workshops that we did with a lot of community members. All right, from Agnes, since the Department of Workforce Services have a Refugee Services Office division, and they serve all refugees and asylees, would organizations serving refugees and asylees not be eligible for this grant? I think that's a great question, Agnes, because DWS does a lot. So if DWS doing something meant that community-based orgs or other folks weren't eligible to help, nobody would be eligible. I think what we want to identify is what are the gaps. So as you're looking at refugees and asylees, what aren't they getting? And it's very possible that there's some resource navigation that could be added onto that to help them connect with DWS and to help them connect with training programs, to be that connective tissue to help things go a little better. And what I would encourage there is, you know, as the community-based org, if you see the gap, just help us understand it with the application. You know, we're trying to communicate our hesitancy to do anything that is duplicative through the RFA. But if you're saying, hey, it doesn't duplicate, there's just something that's not getting done, and it would really create a lot of impact for this community. Help us understand that. We're not the experts in these things. We just need to understand how the pieces fit together and make sure, again, that we're not duplicating. And if you feel like the application does not ask the right questions for you to provide that information, add additional documentation to the RFA, to your application response. We made it possible that you could attach a Word document or a PDF document to your application submission, and that's where you do that. All right, looking through the chat, looking through the Q&A. Jayla, am I missing anything?
Yeah, Jevin, I don't see any missing questions, but just a quick reminder that the application portal will not be open until next Friday, the 20th. So as you're working through the application, just a reminder that that will not be open until then. We're just hoping to give time for folks to get the letter of intent and for us to provide some feedback before that opens.
Okay, so not seeing any more questions. I just encourage you, please feel free to reach out with questions. We will answer anything you have. I'll remind you the LOI is due on Friday. If you don't get it done by Friday, that's not a deal breaker. It just means that we might not be able to get you feedback on that. We will have the additional webinar in June to answer any other questions that you might have. But we're really excited about this. I think it can do some great work. Would love to work with the partners that we have available in Salt Lake County. So if there's any issues that pop up where we could make it, and we can only make it so easy to get through the application, but we want to make it as accessible as possible. Whatever we can do to make the work, to help the work get done, that's our goal here. So I'm gonna just hang out, and this might be an awkward pause for another 4 minutes, but I'll hang out till 2:40. But folks may consider dropping off if you don't have any additional questions. And this isn't like a Marvel movie where we save some sort of like really juicy tidbit for the end. We're done.
Devin, a question from Jenny about the match requirement. Does it have to be a cash match?
1 second, I'm trying to pull up the, Jenny, I'm going to have to go back into the RFA to make sure that I'm answering you correctly. My recollection is that it does not have to be a cash match, but I think this is gonna let's put this on our to-do list so that in the follow-up email that we send out, we answer that for everybody. Jenny, you ask good questions and I give you bad answers back, but I can give you a promise that we will give you a better answer. All right. I will say, in the interest of making sure people have to stay on in the hopes that somebody else asks a question that they like an answer to, I think I'd end our and have a good week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.